Hi, I'm Ron Lawson from Dirtbike magazine. Today we're in the San Bernardino Mountains north of Southern California. We've got the Husqvarna FE350S, which is one of the most desired dual sport bikes on the market. We're going to ride. We've got lots of tall mountains, wet dirt. We can't wait to get to it. We're going to learn a lot about this bike. Husky dual sport bikes seem to be on almost every rider's gonna buy someday list. That hasn't changed in some time, and in fact, the FE350S has been unchanged since 2020. This is one of the few bikes in the Husqvarna line that didn't get a new frame and motor makeover this year, although who knows, that may come in 2024. People like to call Husqvarna's white KTMs. That might be true of some models, but not this one. The Husky's frame, rear suspension, and a number of components are different. The rear suspension uses linkage. In fact, the frame is pretty similar to the one that Husky was racing in Supercross until the season before last. The triple clamp is machined rather than cast. The brakes are made by Braktec, and so is the hydraulic clutch. The handlebar is ProTaper, the rims are DID, and the bodywork is distinctly Husqvarna. There is no map switch, but the bike does come with handguards, a skid plate, and a radiator fan. The motor is identical to the one in the KTM 350 EXCF. When this bike was being developed, it was clear that the engineers put serious effort into making it quiet. One of the methods they employed was the placement of a reed valve between the filter and the throttle body. Noise was also one of the main reasons for the use of Continental TKC80 tires. These are very street-oriented and make very little noise in the ride-by sound test. As a side note, earlier models had a recall on the Continental tires, but that did not affect our test bike. Check with your Husky dealer. We replaced the tires on our test bike anyway with Metzeler TC360 tires, which are a considerable improvement in the dirt. As delivered, the Husky does not have rim locks installed, but they do come with the bike in a small tool package. With real knobbies, you definitely need rim locks. It's also a good idea to balance the tires. Price is kind of a big deal with Husqvarna. It sells for $12,249 plus all the local fees. Certainly is an incredible motorcycle, but you have to understand what it is and what it isn't. In general, all 350 dual sport bikes are made specifically for off-road riding. The FE isn't a very good street bike. It can certainly hang with freeway traffic, but if you have a long way to go on the pavement, you get tired of buzzing the motor. The gearbox is a 6-speed, but it has fairly tight gear ratios, which is what you expect in a dirt bike. This isn't a commuter, and it isn't an adventure bike. It's a dirt bike that has a license plate. In order to gain approval in all 50 states, the Husky had to have all the lights and so forth, and it also had to be super quiet and clean. That kills some of the peak power. To give you a general idea of how it stacks up to a 350 race bike, the FE produces peak power in the high 30s, whereas an FC350 motocross bike is closer to 50. But what the FE lacks in sheer power, it makes up for in smoothness and good manners. Unlike EPA bikes in the past, the Husky doesn't stall or flame out. You can drag it all the way down to idle RPM and just open the throttle all the way to the stops without any complaint. That was unimaginable for a fully compliant EPA bike a few years ago. Even a motocross bike can't do that. When you put this bike on a tight, demanding trail, it will leave a fully built bike far behind as it smoothly climbs over rocks and ledges that will stop a motocrosser in place. Likewise, the weight and handling are downright amazing for a fully legal dual sport bike. On our scale, the FE350S weighs about 245 pounds without fuel. That's only a little more than a 450 motocross bike, and that's with mirrors and everything. It is a little heavier than the KTM 350 that it's so often compared with. That's because it has linkage rear suspension like a motocross bike, and that's about 6 or 7 pounds heavier than PDS rear suspension. But the Husky handles more like a mainstream dirt bike, especially at higher speeds. It rides more level and has a slightly lower saddle height. Riders often complain that the Husky could use a little more ground clearance. Not only is it suspended softly, but the linkage does hang down pretty low and it can catch on rocks and logs. Soft suspension is pretty much part of the package for any dual sport bike, and the Husky's no exception. The shock and the WP Explorer coil spring fork are similar in setup and are designed for slow speed trails and lots of rocks, roots, and logs. It's quite good in that role. When you go faster and encounter whoops, it starts feeling mushy, but it's still well balanced. There are no surprises. We always like to talk a little bit about modifications when it comes to dual sport bikes. As everyone should know, the stock mapping is designed to work with a super quiet exhaust. If you change any single item from the intake to the exhaust without changing the mapping, all that stuff about the motor being smooth and friendly goes out the window. The mapping is locked, and any change will make the bike into a competition bike, at least in the eyes of the law. There are a number of ways to do that. A Vortex or GET ignition are the most common. Should you go down that road? It can be kind of expensive, so it's up to you. We ride very tight trails and love quiet bikes, so the stock power output is fine with us. Along the same lines, the stock fuel tank is 2.3 gallons, and it's pretty safe to go 50 miles in just about any conditions. We got 60 of single track and had a little bit to spare. IMS has a good 3-gallon tank if you need more, and there are other items that should be addressed too from the aftermarket. The stock mirrors are very big and street-oriented. Double Take, SAR, and Tusk have good alternatives. The license plate bracket is floppy and will eventually self-destruct, so it's best to replace it or at least remove the hangy down part before you lose your license plate. The switches and controls are kind of bulky and can interfere with the front brake and clutch. Again, there are good aftermarket sources out there. Despite the little complaints, this is our kind of dual sport bike. It's a street-legal dirt bike. The FE350S is a sweet, fun bike to ride, and there's real power in there if you drill for it. It is, after all, based on an FC350 motocross bike, and all that potential is there. If you want to learn more about this bike and other dual sports, pick up the print edition of Dirtbike magazine from the newsstand or go to dirtbikemagazine.com. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and please subscribe. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching.